Tyson to show up. We're getting our food part set up over here. So in a minute, you will see food down there. I love these like da-da-da-da. Okay, Zim, tell us who's joining us today and let introduce themselves.
Okay, so I'm gonna let them give their introductions, and when you give your introduction, give us your name, description, or impacting communities, and I'm gonna start with Sister Centoya.
Hi, thank you, Brother Zimbabwe. It's nice to be here with everyone. I am Santoy Latifa Trotter. I am a healer. I try to kind of claim that path and walk that path. I have the good fortune to work with adolescents and teens in East and West Oakland through school-based health centers. And also I'm a mom, I'm an auntie. Been living in Oakland for over 20 years at this point in time. You know, born in New York, grew up in Atlanta, but now the West is my home. Really, really glad to be here with everyone and with Chef Sarah and her nourishing, healing foods.
Thank you, Centoya. Welcome aboard, Brother Matthew.
Greetings, peace, everybody. My name is Matthew Linsner, plant enthusiast. I work for an organization called Oakland Leaf. We run after-school programming in East Oakland, and I run a program called Love Cultivating Schoolyards, and we work with high school students cultivating the earth. And so we're currently working at Castlemont High School at the 1 acre plus urban farm and garden, and we're growing food. We got a 12-member CSA that I've been working with Chef Sarah on building. Anybody interested in getting some fresh veggies? We run boxes every week, and we also give out food to community, and we're giving some food for those of you who are cooking today. So hopefully you enjoy the fresh veggies.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. Yeah, we're waiting on Brother Tyson, powerful brother who's also a guest. He'll be joining us soon. But before we get to him, I want to go into an opening question. And this is related in relation to Breonna Taylor. We know the recent events that took place. I don't want to harp on the negative aspect because we know where we're at with that. And so the first question, and I want to start with Centoya, is with the recent news of the officers not being charged with Breonna Taylor, how do we give hope to people who are on the brink of giving up?
I appreciate that question. You know, I think, you know, one of the things that as a therapist that I've been tracking and aware of is that, you know, in the past 10 years, suicide attempts for Black youth have increased by 73%. And, you know, we know like in that past time, one of the things that's happened is not that there's more violence towards Black individuals that's happening and racialized violence from the system by, you know, legal system and other systems. But it's kind of that more, it's more, we're all more aware of it because of social media and kind of it's more publicized. And so that like creates more action, which is a positive thing, and more kind of being able to hold those, or at least work collectively to hold those systems accountable. But also I think the message, especially, you know, just this Wednesday with the ruling, I think the message is it leaves young people feeling not, you know, not valued, like their life doesn't matter, you know. And so I think one way to give hope, because I think we all, you know, were, you know, gutted, even if there was not surprise, you know, in that, like it's still another example. And so let me get to the hope part. Like I think one way is like one thing that is holding on to the like we are part of a long legacy of action and change and collective action, and know that these circumstances may happen, right? That we are in the process of transforming a system, and that we can do that collectively. We can do that with each other and one another, and you know, really, I think not being alone, but being with other people who are just as outraged, or just as sad, or just as worried. But when we come together with that emotional energy, but really that, and that love for community, we can keep working towards transformation. And so, you know, first step is like call a friend, you know, or like sit on the earth, sit on the ground, you know, like connect with, or connect with God, connect with spirit, like connect with something that helps you connect to a feeling of wholeness and connection, right? That's the first thing. But then like, let's come together. I know I called some friends this weekend. It's like, who are other Black women, and it's like, let's just come together and talk and be together, right? So I think connection is the first step. And just like this, like what we're doing here. But then action, especially right now, is so important, and action can take the form of creativity, and just raising awareness and, writing, like you said, you're a writer, like writing out, drawing out, dancing out, what that experience is kind of to be witnessed. There's a lot of collective political action right now, which is just as important as action in the street. So, there's not one right way to move towards change. But I think if we keep, step by step, whatever your art is, your talent, your passion, and if you're not sure what yours is, like, look around you and join up with folks who are doing something, because that sense of agency really, I think, is an antidote to those feelings of hopelessness, right? That we can sometimes, that despair, that we can get to. So those are some thoughts. Hi, Brother Tyson. I see you joined us.
Thank you, Centoya. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brother Tyson Amir. Welcome to Building Bridges Food and Conversation. There's Healing at the Table. Can you tell us a brief description about what you're doing, what work you do in the community, and how it's impacting communities?
Right on. I appreciate that. It's good to be on with y'all. And I look forward to what we're going to be doing over the next hour or so. So my name is Tyson Amir. I'm originally from the South Bay, so born and raised East Side, San Jose. I live out here in Oakland now. I've been in the East Bay since about 2005. And I think that's also important. The time that I was, born and raised up in the Bay Area, we had more like geographical boundaries. Like if you were from the South Bay, it was a, South Bay experience. If you were from the East Bay, it was an East Bay experience. If you're from San Francisco, it's a San Francisco experience. Now things are, merge more, which I think is dope as part of the evolution of who we are as a people. Although, like what the sister was saying, our people throughout the United States are under siege, and that's been our experience since our day one here, especially in the Bay with the rise of the tech industry, gentrification. I mean, we feel it in so many different ways. So my work has always been about the experience of our people and how we can move forward in a revolutionary way, because that's the tradition that I come from. So being born and raised like in the 80s and the 90s, my parents and a whole bunch of my elders came directly from the 60s and the 70s and participating in those movements. And they made it extremely important for me, my older sister, and then folks who were like my peers to have an understanding of that history, especially that revolutionary history and those revolutionary responses that we should be carrying on in our tradition moving forward. So all my work has been centered in that. An example of that, I published my first book in 2016. It came out October 15, 2016. It's called Black Boy Poems, and October 15th is the birth of the Black Panther Party. So I released it on the 50th anniversary of the Black Panther Party, and it's a revolutionary message. And I think that's very important too, because there's a lot of activity that's going on and has been going on. Some of that stuff is not necessarily focused on a revolutionary agenda for our community. And so when I'm talking about revolutionary, I'm talking about the freedom and the liberation of Black people. And if that means dismantling the system that is responsible for denying the freedom and liberation of Black people and all oppressed peoples, and that's what we need to be about. We need to be about doing that, and by any means necessary, and being very strategic with various tactics that we implement to do that. So Black Boy Poems was a way to reinforce that message. I developed the curriculum for that, the Black Boy Poems curriculum, which is being taught in schools throughout the country right now and expanded into more schools. Homeschool networks, African-centered schools, people are using it in community organizations for political education in general. I founded an organization called the Black Literary Collective. So I never had a goal of being an author, but once I moved into that space, because of like the organizing mind that I was raised with as well, I go into a space and I'm like, well, how can we use this for the freedom and liberation of our people? So I started seeing these powerful brothers and sisters who also published works. And I was like, let's form a super team of Black authors, and then let's take our work directly to the community, especially to schools where these schools are saying that our kids don't want to read or write or can't do math. It's because your curriculum is extra whack. We could bring dope curriculum to them, inspire them through our messaging, and then build more community that way, which will lead to an organized revolutionary progressive movement. And so Black Literary Collective has been about that for the past 2-3 years. And then more recently, I created a revolutionary education consultancy firm. It's called Freedom Soul Media Education Initiatives. And just in a couple of years, I'm already in a position where I'm reshaping curriculum for English departments, social studies departments. I got district-wide contracts with folks, but building independent educational institutions. So that the whole idea has been our kids are being bombarded with all this messaging in the school system. How can we occupy space there and give them revolutionary information while building our own independent educational institutions where we won't have to send our kids to their schools no more? And we can keep building that stuff up to change what's going on in our communities. So that is my bad. I think that was a little longer than I thought I was going to be speaking, but that's an answer to your question of some of the stuff that I've been doing lately, which is focused on a revolutionary response and just a revolutionary program when it comes to the freedom and the liberation and self-determination of our community.
That's huge, brother Tyson, man. I appreciate you to the fullest, man, and everything you said, and it needed to be heard. So although it was a little longer, man, this information and the work that you do needs to be heard by our viewers. I had a follow-up question for you. Diana, can you also put this follow-up question in the chat box? With the recent news of the officers not being charged with the killing of Breonna Taylor, how do we give people hope who are on the brink of giving up?
That's the question of our people throughout our entire existence here. I mean, so we can, if we want to like localize it to just what happened with Breonna Taylor. I mean, I had in my book, Black Boy Poems, the last piece that I added to it was a piece about a young brother that I know. His name is Mario Woods. He was killed on December 2nd, 2015 by SFPD. I'm at the house on December 2nd, you know what I'm saying, scrolling my social media timeline. I see a hashtag, I recognize his name, and I'm like, wait, hold up. See it again, again, and again. Eventually I see a video. It was a brother that was in my math class. You know what I'm saying? I taught him pre-algebra, I taught him algebra, and I'm seeing the last couple seconds of his life because you got SFPD firing more than 40 shots at this brother. You know what I'm saying? So whether we're talking about Mario Woods, Breonna Taylor, we talking about Emmett Till, we can go further back. Like, this has been the experience of our people. And at times we have responded in ways that have pushed the agenda and pushed the system to the brink of revolutionary change for our folk. But then at times we've responded in a way where it's just been following a script where, all right, we out there for a little while, then we go back home and then the same thing is going to happen again. So it's traumatic. Like, we have to support each other. And the sister was speaking about that. So we have to support each other in that, while at the same time being involved in programming that is specifically focused on revolutionary change. And I think that's also part of a response to the traumatic nature of this social and cultural and political experience that we've been subjected to. We have to be involved in activities that are focused on revolutionary change. It can't simply be, let's just keep fulfilling the script of, all right, the state kills one of our own. We get angry for a while and then we fall back, and then the state does it again. We get angry again for a while. Like, we gotta be focused on something different. And we have that example in our historical record. And we just gotta go back to carrying on the tradition of our ancestors that were really about that and supporting each other throughout this process, because it ain't easy.
Thank you, brother Tyson, man. You hitting on some key points, man. I appreciate you. I'm gonna move on to brother Matthew.
Wow, what can I say, Brother Tyson? There's some powerful words. I'm humbled to be in the presence of such powerful panelists. Here I am, a simple farmer, so to speak. So I don't really have a lot that I can speak to like the brother did and the sister did, in sense. I definitely can't speak to what our Black and brown communities are going through at this point in time. But a lot of what you all said really resonated in that, how important it is to maintain those connections to self, to the other, and to place. And I feel like, a lot of the answers I may give today are just kind of really rooted in the work I do and why I do that work. And it's really rerouting and remembering place. And through that, remembering self and then reconnecting. And I think like the sister was saying in the beginning, it's really important that we maintain those relations with like-minded, but also folks who hold us accountable, folks who pull us up, folks who uplift us in that time when we're kind of feeling down and we're beating ourselves up, or we may feel hopeless and like there's no opportunities. To just be sitting here listening to the two panelists before me, it gave me inspiration to know like there's all sorts of people out there who we don't even know, we've never heard of, doing amazing, powerful work. And they're not going to get the main microphone or the spotlight, especially mainstream media, and especially, you know, in our society, which does not favor anything that goes against the dominant narrative. At this point, we know we've heard a lot of what that dominant narrative is. So I really love the idea of channeling that frustration or that hopelessness or that anger into creativity, whatever your creative outlet is. And so personally for me, I find a lot of joy and creativity and hope when I just go outside into the garden, when I plant, you know, put my hands in the earth, when I can create a vision for what we're going to produce food wise, and then that comes to fruition. And then when I work with the young folks who are, you know, out there doing the same things, rediscovering the joy of working with life and creating life and cultivating life, and then ultimately harvesting that and nourishing ourselves with that bounty. So I love this concept of alternative institutions, because we know that the systems and the institutions in this country are designed to keep the wealthy and the powerful in power. And you know, Brother Tyson's doing amazing work, rewriting curriculum and redesigning curriculum, but ultimately creating those alternatives for our young folks to come up in a new paradigm, a new narrative that's real and rooted in truth. So I just, again, much love and respect to y'all for that work. And you can find hope everywhere, you know, and it's tough. And I can't say, you know, just do this and do that. But I do know when I look inside myself or when I look outside, I can see that hope. As Tupac said, the rose that grew from concrete. You can see the hope even in the bleakest situations. So hopefully that can help you find that time.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. I just wanted to comment on what Centoya said. What stood out about her statement was, you know, having that hope starts with us working collectively. And meeting Tyson Amir for the first time, like us fighting for our nation, are we gonna collaborate? Like I plan on collaborating with you after this. And so just being mindful that we can continue to lean on each other. All of us bring different gifts and talents, and our perspectives are rich, and we can continue to do the great work. Sarah G, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'm pushing in a little bit here. Hey Tyson, good to see you, brother. Thanks for coming on. So here's the deal, right? Because I do think that Santoy shared a really important point, right? It's community. But here's the question that I want to just put out there just to bounce around, right? Because I think one of the issues that we have, right, and I think it's something just as simple as this. So Tyson sharing what he said and offering what he does and doing the work that he does could very easily be perceived as militant, right? But if we look at the Jewish community, for example, and look at Hasidic Jews, and for example, a community who has taken on every aspect of their own care and made it just a communal property, right? They have their own policing, they have their own hospitals, they have their own doctors, they govern within themselves. And they're looked at as a strong, spiritually aligned, religious community, right? What do we have to do within ourselves, right? Within the Black and Brown community to change the perspective within us that like collective responsibility is self-determination, right? And that we can't do this in an isolated form, and that joining a movement that is about education and wellness and progressiveness is not a militant movement.
Hey, Centoya, I'm gonna start with you.
I mean, I think you're right, Sarah. I mean, one, if you think about what do people externally think, it doesn't really matter, right? Like kind of if other people have concerns. But I think your question is to kind of the internal piece, and similar yet different, right? Jewish community also had like historic collective trauma, which then kind of people were able to come together, right? And I think for African American people have had longer historical traumatic, trauma due to chattel slavery right here in this country. And I think there are, I mean, as Brother Tyson said, like we are not, here 220, like there are movements, people who have come together. There are places where Black folks have come together. There are Black banks and I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, and I feel like I'm so grateful to grow up in a city where I could see that around me, in Black business and Black schools and people taking care of each other and, teaching each other's children what we knew we weren't going to get taught in school. But I think we do need that kind of collective focus, and I think it's revolutionary. Like I don't necessarily correlate militant and revolutionary kind of with the same thing. We do need a revolution. Like the systems and the structures that we have right now are inherently, saturated with racism, and not just the legal system, also the education system, also the mental health system, also the healthcare system, like some of those systems that I'm a part of. And in order to actually take care of Black children and people, but I'm going to focus on children and adolescents, there needs to be transformation. And, as Matthew was saying, like, how do we go back to the land? How do we go back to like getting rid of capitalism, right? That's what we're talking about, right? Like capitalists like is just something for some, but not something, or at least that's how I'm going to name that, right? Like not something for all. And there are ways of living and growing food and taking care of children and instilling pride and dignity and respect that takes care of the whole and also takes care of Black people, right? Like it's not an either or. It's not like, oh, we're going to take care of Black people and then somehow there's less left for other people. Like that's not, there is enough for everybody. And I think the kind of the lie of capitalism is that there's not enough, right? There's not enough food, or there's not enough housing, or there's not enough. So it's hard for me to answer how people don't see it as because I see that as, I see revolutionary transformation of our systems as something that we need. And I don't read that as militant. And I think that some people call for separation, right? And some people don't. And that's, even those two ideas can still coexist with each other. So I don't know, that's some of the thoughts I have.
Brother Matthew.
So it's a tough question. I agree. I think that a lot of it comes down with portrayal. I see how media has been portraying Black Lives Matter, and then you see like the 3%ers or the good old boys or whatever they want to call themselves, and they're portrayed as, patriotic heroes. So there's a lot of power in media, and I think that the ability to create a new narrative is it comes when you can create alternative media sources, alternative systems. And so that's what I loved about the work that Brother Tyson's doing, is like creating alternative institutions. And it's kind of like, we're not going to give you the power because we're doing something else. Like we're not walking that road. We're going to walk a different road. We're going to build a new path. And that's really kind of maybe philosophical and not very practical. So in terms of like answering that question, it's a tough one, and I can't say too much. I do love what the sister said about the lie of capitalism, how there's never going to be enough, and so we're always fighting over the scraps. But here we are in this land of abundance and waste, and so how do we tap into that? How do we create new systems where we are actually transforming waste into resources, and resources can nourish more and more? I think that's a big part of the work that I'm doing, at least what motivates me in the working with the earth. And the lie of capitalism has to die. I mean, it has to. So That's what I could say.
Thank you, brother Matthew. And I just want to add to that. You know, we'll always be deemed as militant. When the civil rights movement started, it was based on Emmett Till and a lot of other things, of course. The Black Panthers started to police the police for our own people, and so no matter what we do to defend ourselves, we'll always be deemed as militant, and we got to be okay with that, because as long as we do the work to transform our people and our lives, that's what counts. So I'm okay with the titles as long as we do the work and we get to that next level we need to get to for freedom and liberation. Brother Tyson, I'm calling on you.
Right on. I'm in favor of all of that. And I think what you were saying is something that, we just have to acknowledge based on the system. The system was predicated on the genocide of our indigenous brothers and sisters, and then the forced enslavement of African bodies. When you have that as the DNA of the system that we still all are being impacted by, they are going to continue to refer to those groups of people as threats, as militant, as whatever, because their power, what they feel is their power, their wealth, the property that they've stolen, and now they reinforce the fact that they've stolen it through all these different forms of violence. They can't continue to have that if these people stand up and these people rise up. So whatever they can use as a tool to try to deflect or to keep people confused or to keep them controlled, they're going to continue to do that. And we've seen that all throughout. I mean, the first instances of like surveillance happen to our community and to indigenous folk, because they're like, all right, we need to know who these people are, where they are, where they're moving. We need to limit their interactions, all of that stuff. So I mean, that's also been since day one. So if militancy comes with it, cool. And then we also know that, like Dr. King, his whole thing was nonviolence. Nothing militant about that objectively, but because he was able to organize people, he was still viewed as a threat by the federal government. And of course, they took the brother off the board by assassinating him. And then you have somebody like recently, Kaepernick, kneeling during the national anthem. How is that being viewed as something that's militant? But it was a challenge to the establishment, and they're going to define that as militant anyway. So it don't matter what we do. We can hands up, hey, don't hit us, don't shoot us. Or we can be out there like Jonathan Jackson ran up in the Marin courthouse trying to get George Jackson out with they're going to call it that anyway. What's more important is what we decide to do as a community and how we see through that, because that propaganda and that programming is real. And we might be in our own community and see somebody saying, let's do this different. Let's get together. Let's work as a cooperative. Let's be collaborative in the way that we respond to what we're facing. And some of us, because of the programming, might be like, oh, that's too much. Y'all moving it too militant. Y'all too bold. You're too this, and that can prevent people from the community being involved in it. But that's why it's so important for all of us to be able to do that work of getting to know each other, because we can see through that, and we can see through the programming, and then we become stronger by standing together. That's going to happen. I mean, some people might even claim what we're doing right now is militant. We just over here talking about community building, how we can move forward and eating. But that might be viewed as a challenge to some folks, right? Cool. But because we know where we are on this call and anybody else is watching it, we can see through that. And I think that's so important. We really got to get to back this idea of, the power to people, or all power to the people. We got to come together and we got to build and support each other through this process. And if we do that, then we start really responding in a way that I think is revolutionary and dynamic. And we got to build up those independent institutions. We got to have our own food. We got to have access to our own resources. We got to have our own healthcare system. We have to, because depending on them has created what we've seen over the past 400 plus years. We got to do different. And we have the ability to do that.
Thank you, Brother Tyson. I'm going to segue into the next question. Diana, can you put it in the chat box? Given the current heightened state of racial injustices, our nation's history, and your own lived experiences, both personally and professionally, what are your recommendations on creating widespread public safety in all communities? And I'm going to start with Santoya.
I saw this question. This is a deep, big question. And I think I don't have kind of like one, two, three. I think some of the recommendations is what we're talking about. How do we build a world that works for everyone? How do we build a world where people get education, people have food, people have housing? I think that's where you begin to get safety. Is that we take care of people, we take care of one another, and we build communities where there is that build systems and communities where there is that collective deep care. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think I can, as a therapist, and kind of thinking about kind of trauma comes from like harm and violence, and even collective violence. Like what is the harm, that leads to that collective violence? And I think about I can't remember his name right now, but the brother who wrote My Grandmother's Hands, who's looking at the impact of white supremacy and racism on the body. Like, he's a somatic therapist, and really he takes us kind of looking at what was the trauma and violence for people who like transferred over to here from Europe, and like kind of this violence and trauma kind of gets passed on and passed on and passed on, and so and it's not like that's the only, many of us may have experienced trauma in the past. It doesn't mean that the answer is that we're responding from a place of harm, right? But I do think that being able to have a place where we do prioritize healing, where we do prioritize housing and food and education, where people are getting what they need, is one place. And then I think some of the system, like kind of the community, like the system and structural change happening as well, so that people aren't harmed inside of these systems. So that's, yeah. Maybe circle back, but that's my kind of initial thought. It's a big, big question for sure.
Huge question. Thank you, Centoya. Brother Tyson, you got something for us?
Yeah, I think similar to what Sister Centoya was saying and some of the other things that we've talked about, I think it's extremely important for us to have control of our own institutions and the resources within our community if we're talking about being self-determined. And I think that is essential if we're saying public safety. We live under a system that has never ensured safety for our community and a whole bunch of other communities. So in that empirical historical data that we see based on that, and the clear evidence based on the contemporary place that we're in right now, same thing because of these systems. And it doesn't matter, like we got Trump right now. We can rewind back. I mentioned Mario Woods, that happened during the Obama administration. We can rewind back before that, and we can be in the Bush Jr. administration, and it doesn't matter. We're talking about the same stuff happening time and time again. The nuances might be a little bit different because of the specific time that we're looking at. But when we are able to control what is happening around us because we have influence over those institutions, we can try to ensure the safety of our people, and anybody else is going to be influenced by that. But when we don't, then we are dependent on whoever, and these people have a very clear agenda, and it's been demonstrated very overtly for the past 4+ centuries. So one thing that I know I've done, and this also comes from the lineage that I've inherited, like I've trained myself in order to be able to defend myself, to defend my family, to defend my community. And because of my alternative or my cultural teaching background, and then also understanding the colonial system, I know how to take what I've learned and be able to put that in other bodies and other minds as well, so that they can be trained in how to defend themselves, defend their families, and defend their communities. And that is, hand to hand, and that is with having to use other implements that we might need in order to defend ourselves. I think that's one aspect of public safety or public health. But then there's the other part of what we've been talking about, building our own institutions. Everything that I've built, and this is also because of what my ancestors and my elders have taught me, I've created it to be able to control it. So I published a book, I have my own publishing company for that. The curriculum that I created, that's my own curriculum. The company that I said that I've established, the nonprofit, that's my own. So I can bring in my community members, and then it's also developed in a way where it can be replicated in other places so that we can have these institutions in existence and they can be sustainable. And I think that's very, very important. We've been put on a path of, because of capitalism, how we've been talking about, like overemphasizing the idea of the individual or individualism. You accomplish your goals, you get your money up, and now you're removed from the collective. I've tried to get back to how can we build this and evolve or move forward the collective at the same time. I think that's key. And then building those institutions that deal with the areas that, you know, we've been victimized by.
Right, right.
And
Tyson,
then being able to defend ourselves. I think that's really, really important. We got to be trained, whether we, you know, want that or not, because of the situation that we're in. I think it's important for people to know how to defend themselves, their families, and their community.
Right. Tyson, I had a follow-up question. You mentioned you have your own book and you have your own self-publishing company. How do you encourage young people to use self-agency when it comes to like what you do with the work that
I mean, all day, every day, anytime. If I'm in a space with young people, that is part of the formula of the programming that they're going to receive. And I don't mean programming as in like brainwashing, but as an example of you know, some of the work that we do with the Black Literary Collective, we have programming where students will publish a book. So they're going to do the writing, but they're also going to learn the process of how you publish, and then learn the importance of the value of their work, and then having that work in the community and how they can make money off of that, not to exploit the community, but how we can make this sustainable. So it's equipping the young mind with the understanding of the context, the purpose behind it, and then the skills to be able to replicate that same thing. And that's something that's not going to be part of any colonial educational experience that they get. They're going to be programmed and brainwashed on certain information, but not really given the context, not really given the purpose or the intention behind it, and certainly not being equipped with skills that will allow them to do something in the future. And so it's necessary for that to happen. So the students that go through my program, like I have a couple of them who have already who published their own books, and, you know, I helped support them in that process, but they took all those steps because they learned it when they were with us in the program. And then they get that whole philosophy of you want to control your own material. So that's why you want to get your ISBN numbers, which will set up your publishing company. You want to do this where this will be your work forever, and then you can help somebody else publish, or you can get them to do the same thing in the future.
right? Snowball effect, man. I love it. I love it. I want to move on to Brother Matthew, the second question.
Yeah, I love how Brother Tyson's talking about the specifics to being self-sufficient, or to owning your own, you know. And I think that's a dope concept that we really need to go deeper into in all aspects of life, right? So there's also this concept of collective health and owning collective health. So like being responsible to the collective for the health of the collective. Like, it is my duty to maintain your health and make sure you are healthy and that you're eating the healthiest food you can. And so I love this idea of owning health, and really becoming autonomous through our ability to own our own health and create systems where we can be healthy and thrive, right? So we're in communities like East Oakland, where you can find cheap hamburgers, but you can't find an organic apple. We need to redesign or recreate alternatives and provide access or create opportunities of access for folks to come and get that organic fresh food, or get that knowledge of you know, martial arts, self-defense, right? And so it's like when I hear you talk, Brother Tyson, I hear you talking about the whole person. It's like, it's not just one aspect of life. Like, we need to own all of it, from how we think to how we go to sleep at night, to the books we're reading and the food we're eating and what we're doing with our free time. And I do think we've become so segmented and sectionalized through for one, through capitalism, two, through social media and technology, and now even in COVID, it's even worse, where we're not, you know, communing like we used to. We're not coming together and congregating. And so we have to rethink and be creative. How are we coming together? How are we redesigning spaces so that folks can seek out each other when they need it? Folks can lean on each other when needed, and do it in ways that maintain collective health. Yeah.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. I'm going to move on to the next question. This is for everyone. Are there any techniques? Oh, Sarah, do you want to go? All right, go ahead, sis.
Well, I'm sorry. So I just want to follow up on this collective health as I have my vegans and pescatarians in the room right here, right here, right here. So let's talk a little bit about just that, right? Wellness, right? What does it mean to be able to do any of these things, right? When we talk about how we show up and whether we're showing up, you know, just for our work day or for our families or for a protest or whatever, the importance of showing up in a body that's cared for. You're looking at my coach moderator up there in terms of our physical, making sure that we're getting some exercise. And then our diet, like this week was an amazing, amazing, amazing week. Like I love this kind of end of summer, beginning of fall bounty thing. But we've got, you know, one of the things that was really incredible last week, we talked about the importance of just being able to go out and touch the earth, being able to touch the soil, or hug a tree, taking some of that natural energy and having it transform us. And then in the wake of all of the news this week and all of the heaviness, we got to harvest yams. See that smile up there? Which I gotta tell y'all, folks, it was like amazing. It was absolutely amazing to like move like soil and underneath it find these arm length like sweet potatoes of various colors, and then be able to come home and roast them, right, and get that. All right. And so what we did, and you guys are all in recipients of that, right? So everything that Matthew put in that box this week, we turned into a meal. So we've got collard greens and we've got beet and apples as a salad. We've got roasted butternut squash with sweet potatoes in them. We've got black eyed peas. I've been loving working with fresh black eyed peas this year with some rice. What else is in there? We've got some okra and pumpkins and tomatoes that we cooked down and made this amazing succotash. Finished that off with some cardamom pods. And I say that to say, like when we talk about using all of our experiences, right? Each of us has a plethora of different experiences, but when we pull those experiences together, right? I mean, that's the kind of core foundation of how we heal community. Right. And I think one of the things that it's hard for people in the East sometimes to realize is that diet and exercise is just as important as being able to go out there and, you know, protest and do other stuff. Like you also have to take some self-inventory and making sure you're trying to stay as healthy as you can so that you can be mentally strong to fight this revolution. And that in terms of trauma, making sure that you're taking care of yourself so that when you're in a state of feeling down and depressed, that your body's also not going down that road with you. All right, back to you, Z.
Thank you. And thank you, sis. That segues into our next question for everyone. Are there any techniques for the community on dealing with these traumas and injustices? Like, do you guys have practices that you use? I want to start with Santoya.
I think one, like recognizing when we do feel safe, right? There's just like, you know, as Chef Sarah was talking about, like kind of how do we also recognize that place when we are feeling safety and connection and joy or resilience. You know, the Black Joy Parade. I saw my niece, you know, marching down there, and they want to like being able to recognize those moments of safety and joy and really like imprint them, you know, as much as, especially because there's so much stress and trauma and violence that is coming in, to really like take in those moments of joy or safety or connection. I think there are so many healing practices, you know. I think drumming, you know, things that resonate within the body is what I really want to lift up right now. But like, you know, drumming or dance or writing or creativity, and how do we do those together? You know, that singing, you know, making music, gardening, farming, you know, and you know, there's so many practices. I think what we're in thinking about collective wellness is doing those together. When we're thinking about our Black and brown children, like how do we do that where we're tying it into like a legacy? Like you and I were talking about Zimbabwe earlier, like countering the narrative, like you are whole, you are well, you come from traditions of health and well-being and vibrancy, you know, like really telling the stories, like what happened before chattel slavery, before crack cocaine got pushed into our communities, you know, like before mass incarceration, like we are from, you know, just talent and intellect and beauty and grace, you know, but we really like telling those stories. You know, I think even just right now, like look at that picture of this plate that Sarah created, you know, like that art, that talent. So I think some of the collective healing comes from really intentionally coming together, and we need to do it. We need to do it more often, you know, and I think some of that happened historically, you know, in the Black church, right? And that's still one place where that comes, but it's not the place for everyone, right? It's not the only place of, you know, it might be where, I'll speak for myself, like my mama and my grandmother, like kind of pull that inspiration, that spiritual somehow ability, no matter what is going on, to like, right, you know, to like keep on going, keep on moving. And you know, there are many places that we can root into for our healing and well-being. But it takes, you know, our young people need us, you know, like I just want to like hats off to like everybody who's on this, who dedicate their time and their lives and their efforts to young people, you know, and even if for those who it's not your full-time job or something that you're doing, you know, whether it's just inside of your own family, you know, and the young folks that are there, or whether you have time to commit to community, and volunteer some of your time, like they need to even just see, themselves reflected. You know, they need to know, and our communities, some of our communities, you know, you were talking about our communities in East Oakland, like some of our communities have been gutted by, you know, systemic policies that have, some of the adults less available, you know. But I think that to know that that is not an individual problem, like that's a collective, harm that has happened, and it is whether or not we are directly impacted by that, like it's our responsibility to kind of reach in, reach out, and support the healing of the community, you know, which folks are doing right here, right now. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Centoya. I have a bad connection, so I was kicked out of the group, but I'm back. And I wanted to add, one of the practices for me is exercise. You know, the gyms are closed, of course, because of COVID, but I recently bought some battle ropes, and I go to the park. And for those who don't know what battle ropes are, there's these big, thick ropes that you use, and you do these exercises. You move it in different kinds of motions, and they work out your upper body, your core, your legs, and outlets is the exercise. It keeps me healthy, and it also helps me sleep better. You know, with everything that's going on, we all have a lot on our minds, and so that exercise will tire you out. By the end of the night, you ready to close your eyes and go to sleep. And even the power of social media, me posting the battle ropes on social media, people are like, where are you doing this at? Can I join you? And I'm definitely gonna have my sister, Chef Sarah Germany, join me soon, and have her arms and core and legs and everything burning. And so that's one of my practices that I use. Yeah. Brother Tyson.
Yeah, that's key. And so personally, that a workout routine, trying to eat well, um, and be disciplined and regimented, but not like as an extremist, but still making sure that you make time in your day. So you know, I know Sarah because we were doing work over at Youth Uprising. So I remember what it was like that last Friday that we were all in the building together, and that following Monday, so March 13th, and that following Monday, March 16th, everything got shut down. And so for us, like being in community that way and doing the work that we were doing, and we all had different focus points within that community space. She was trying to make sure that there was quality food that was available to the community. Folks were coming to me and, you know, getting their academic program, and then some other, you know, revolutionary stuff that we were doing, and some writing stuff. And then you had some other people doing more creative work in accounts. So that we were trying to build a community that was providing a lot of the stuff that our people needed, that was taken away because we had to, you know, be in distance learning or shelter in place, but still trying to keep a a disciplined schedule that incorporates many of those aspects, and then finding ways to still do that in community. So building community wherever we are, because I think that's one of our greatest strengths. And as like the descendants of African peoples, although there are many different places that our people came from on the continent, family, tradition, lineage was extremely important. And we've tried to maintain that however we can. I think that's a very important strategy for us in this. But personally, making sure that I'm eating right, making sure that I'm working out. I work out. I try to work out every day if I can. If not, then it's going to be 5, maybe 6 days a week, getting something quality in, spending that time in my body, stretching, some type of reflective activity, and then creating. Creating, I think, is very important. From some of my elders that were in the Black Panther Party, they would talk about how one of the most important things that we can do is think. We get caught up so much in reacting and responding to what is happening around us. It's very difficult for us to have time to actually think and plan ahead. So thinking, building, creating, and then making that stuff manifest. Matthew was talking about the power of, all right, we're going to plant this. We actually plant it, and then we're harvesting it. And so now it's become a reality for our community. So being able to, plant the seeds of the idea, work the plan, and then harvest that. And then this thing is now in the community. I remember when I had the idea for my book, I remember doing all the work for the book. I remember what it was like putting the book in somebody's hand. I remember having the idea for the curriculum, doing the work for the curriculum, putting the curriculum in somebody's hand. And then what it was like when this school district was like, give us 500 copies of your curriculum. Like, wait, hold up. You know what I'm saying? That's we're created a whole new reality now. So I think that's also a very important thing. We got to think, we got to create, and we have to manifest these things so they become new realities in our experience, in our community. And we can do that. Like, we're building community now. There's a lot that can come out of just this group of people who are on this call. What can we build? We got a responsibility to do that and for that to manifest. And I think that's also part of like the healing strategies for us. Like, let's create this stuff and let's make it real in our community. Like, this was an idea that Sarah had. I remember she was telling me about it. I'm like, I like that. What's up? We here now. I got the food heating up in the background. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're here. It's become real. So let's keep doing that for our community.
Thank you, Tyson. Well, before we move to Matthew, sis, what's on that gorgeous plate?
All of Matthew's hard work. We've got latte collard greens with green onions, tomatoes, finished off with coriander, cumin, and fennel seeds. We've got some roasted sweet potatoes and roasted butternut squash that are literally just roasted. For those of you who haven't had the pleasure of harvesting a yam and eating it the next day, check that out. You don't need anything on it. I think John Araya was the first person that got me to eat a sweet potato with nothing on it. Jonna, you've got to try these. We've got some black-eyed peas and rice, and we've got a beet and apple salad. And then we've got a really amazing succotash that is made with whole roasted tomatoes, okra, and pumpkin. Why? Because that's what we harvested this week.
That's what's up, sis. Thank you. Okay, Brother Matthew, man, what are some techniques that you use to help our communities deal with trauma?
I just have to say, Chef Sarah's so dope. Like, she comes out to the farm and we go around and she's like, what's ready? And I'm like, oh, we got some of these, maybe the celery's ready. Can you take some? We got more, we planted more, people don't really want it. She's like, all right, we're gonna make this, this, and this. She's a creator. She is a creative person. And so it's like these relationships, they nourish me so much. I told her, this is my favorite relationship that I've nourished since COVID hit. We started pre-COVID. She was at Youth Uprising and we were giving veggies. We were trying to get our youth to kind of cross-pollinate. She had some young folks she was mentoring in the kitchen, and I had a bunch of young folks I was teaching out on the farm, and we were trying to get them to kind of work together and come together. And then we got into a little groove, and then COVID hit, and then we kind of, we all got shook a little bit, but man, she's coming strong. So I love it. Yeah. And also wanted to say, I know those battle ropes, man. I know those battle ropes. Ooh. I used to train with Grandmaster Doug Jones on DJ's Martial Arts and Fitness over there in the Laurel. And anybody interested in East Oakland, if you're up in High Street or the Diamond and you want to go check him out, he is an amazing teacher. He's taught me so much more than just martial arts and fitness. He's taught me life skills and the joy of life. And so I just want to honor him at this moment and give him much love out there wherever he is. He's the Kung Fu Cowboy, and he told me he has horses. So he's a world famous Kung Fu master. He's got some world championship titles, and here he is. He's been in Oakland, born in Oakland, and he's teaching in Oakland. He's got a studio right there in the Laurel for I don't know how many years, 25 plus years. But he's a cowboy at heart, and he's got horses up there on the ranch on Skyline. And he told me, he said, I never let anybody shovel my shit, because that's how I get my work done. When I go up to the horse stable and I'm shoveling that shit, I work through my own stuff. I work through it. And not only am I working through it emotionally, I get the full body workout, and that's kind of like it made me think about the work I do out on the farm, because although I don't go to the gym and I don't exercise, man, I come home tired when I'm out there, because we're digging, we're moving, we're picking. It's a full body thing. And so I would just say the advice I have is try to get up and be active, whatever, in whatever capacity you have, in whatever way you have, move around, reconnect to your body, get some of those old creaks out of your bones, and that'll help. I at home, we've been dealing with a lot of anxiety, some depression. I'm gonna keep it real. We have that in my house, and it's been hard. I have 4 young children at home. My wife is at home. She's a full-time teacher. She's teaching at home. We got 2 young children in elementary school learning online, and we got 2 that are not even in elementary school yet. So it's a full house, and COVID has been a blessing to be home with the family, to spend that much time with my children when I would normally be out. But it's been a challenge in ways I never would have imagined. So I've really had to find ways to kind of deal with my own anxiety, about them getting sick or about, other situations happening. But ultimately, it's a lot of frustration. Been dealing with a lot of frustration and some anger at home, and not wanting to manifest that on my family in any way. So a technique I've been really practicing that's helped me a lot is to wake up really early in the morning. I'm a farmer anyway, so I got to get up before the sun shines and before it gets hot. But getting up that extra half hour even before, and having that quiet time to myself, I can pray and meditate, and then I stretch, and I really just try to work my body. And I got this roller that I love. I actually got it right here. I'll show you guys if you're interested. This is one of the tools I would say, invest in one of these. This is the Rumble roller. You lay on it, you roll on it. It gets all that nasty lactic acid, all that gross stuff out of your muscles. And it's the saving grace. So I do that every day. It really helps me a lot. And after I roll out, I feel so calm and real nice. So yeah, that's what it is.
That's what's up. Thank you, Matthew.
So
Can I add one thing, Zimbabwe?
Sure, go ahead. Yep.
I think, we're definitely talking about a lot of collective and individual healing practices and things that people can do. And I just, as a therapist, I'll be remiss, if I don't also just remind us that sometimes, things get to a place where we do need professional support and help, right? And psychotherapy, and that, finding something that is, working with a therapist that, is going to respect and connect with kind of your culture and be culturally accountable. But I think, as Black folks, sometimes as community of color, that can feel there's still a stigma, and some of that stigma is because the mental health system, has not, also is embedded with racism. And, I'm a therapist, there are therapists out there, and that there does sometimes come a time, I've been to therapy, there does come a time sometimes when that, for some people, is what is needed, and no shame, it's really, can be something that can be life-saving. And even if not life-saving, it's something that can just help us feel better and kind of do some personal healing that needs to be done. So I just wanted to make sure I named that as well. Thank you.
Cool.
I'm
Thank you
gonna
for
pick,
naming that, Santoya. Go ahead, sis. You got it.
I'm gonna piggyback on that too, because I called my therapist after like a year-long absence just this week, right? And I think for me, it's like, and what I said to her in my opening like monologue was, "Hey, remember me? I am angrier than I want to be right now, and I can't shake this shit, right?" And I think that's really important. It's like knowing when like you're out of sorts, like knowing when like you have felt like a way that you haven't wanted to feel for more days than you wanted to feel that way. And if you've leaned on your friends and if you've leaned on your spouse or whatever, and you're still feeling shaky, yeah, make that phone call. And I think if, you know, I come from a family where therapy is known as psychobabble. People are not in support of it at all, but I've also found that it is another art of healing, right? Having a private space where you can just sort of share everything that is going on for you without judgment, right? And then taking the time and energy to find the therapist that works for you. Like if you meet somebody and they don't work for you, go meet somebody else. Like don't just throw the whole thing out, right? If finding a person of color is important, if finding a woman is important, if finding a dude that happens to be physically fit is important, like they're out there. Do the work and get the help you need.
Thank you, sis. Thank you, sis. And we're going to segue into voting. 2020 has been a year of pain, a year of change, and definitely the year of voting. So I want to ask everyone, and I want to ask them, you guys, how can voting in November shift the change we want to see? And I want to start with Brother Tyson.
You got me right in the middle of putting some stuff from the skillet to the plate. So my bad for the little delay. It's important, but I think the stuff that we are focusing on in this call is equally, if not more important. We've had, like, however we can manifest our power, we have to do that. So I'm not minimizing the vote at all. So in whatever's going on, I think all of us are here in Oakland. So whatever's going on locally in what we can vote for to create some type of change and put people in office that we can hold accountable and will be about an agenda that's about the people and not business as usual in the United States of America. We got to do that. If we can do that on the state level, we got to do that. If we can do that on the federal level, we got to do that. But the system, we know, whether we're talking about the county system, we're talking about the city system, we're talking about the state system, we're talking about the federal system, it has never operated in a way that's been about our people. I'm saying, I was having a conversation with my wife the other day, and she was asking about, because my wife, she's originally from East Africa. Her family's Eritrean. She was raised in Australia from the age of 5 or 6. And so she's been here in the States with me for the past couple of years. And, you know, we have conversations about global history and, you know, US history. So she was like, well, when did Black people really get the right to vote? I was like, all right, well, you can say constitutionally, you have the 15th Amendment, which is 1870, which supposedly gave the right to vote to Black men. But then, of course, people still fighting for their voting rights up until the present day. So you have systems that have been put in place that have never really been about us. And we've had white faces up there. We've had Black faces up there. We've had folks who are gender non-conforming in some of those places. And many of the same systematic things have happened to impact Black communities, other communities of color. It don't matter who the face is. It don't matter what the gender is of the person. So what we can do to manifest our power by having our own institutions is extremely important. If there is a strategic way for us to use the vote in county, city, state, federal, then we have to seize that as well, because all of those things can be steps towards the freedom and the liberation of our people. But freedom and liberation through the system that has caused the problems, I don't see that as a formula for resulting in what we've been talking about. That's going to come outside of that. But if there is a way for us to strategically use that to bring about some type of change or have some type of influence over what's going on, then we have to do that. And it is our responsibility to take advantage of that. So That's why use the vote, use the power of the vote, and let's be strategic with how we use that. And I don't think that's what we're doing right now. We're not coming together as a community and saying, all right, we're going to use our vote this way. But still, if there's a way for us to use it strategically, we got to do that. And then we got to get busy with this work of building our own independent institutions so we can become a self-determining people, because we know the system that is directly connected to the vote has operated the way that it has historically and in a contemporary moment. I mean, just everything that we talked about with Breonna Taylor, that was the state attorney general. And he was elected by the people. And the decision that he made was horrible. But we've seen that happen again and again. You know what I'm saying? Like going back to Mario Woods, I'm gonna put this out here. Kamala Harris, she was the attorney general at the time. She didn't do nothing. You know, she was in San Francisco before that, and we was on her doorstep every day telling her about, yo, police officers in San Francisco, do something about it. She didn't do nothing. You know, so we got to get active in both areas. Be strategic here and be strategic in our community. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Brother Tyson. I'm gonna go with Matthew.
Tyson, that's hella real. I mean, I think what I really like is you actualize the politicians and their record for the community. I mean, Kamala Harris, same way. Like, we may be looking at her as our only option, or we may be excited that she's on the ticket, but ultimately, like, what did she do in our communities right here? And I have to say the same thing. It's like the system is designed to keep those in power powerful, and to kind of keep everyone else feeling like maybe they contributed in some way, you know. Obviously, I advocate for voting, especially in the elections that I feel like we have the most influence in, which are our local elections, right? So Oakland, Alameda County, California. But ultimately, I agree. I think the system's designed in a way that's, it's not, voting is not the only thing we can do. I work with a lot of young folks who don't have the necessarily the ability to vote, right? And even if they are of age, some of them don't necessarily have legal status in the country. So what do we talk about? You know, last week we were talking about the situation. We're talking about, we're actually talking about how industrial agriculture has led to the marginalization of, you know, Black and brown communities, specifically indigenous communities here in California, and migrant workers, and then having the conditions that they have to work in through the fires and through COVID, making it even worse. And so what can they do? What power do our young folks have, or what power does our community have to kind of tell those institutions or those mega farms, like, we don't approve of your labor environmental practices? Well, we don't buy their products. So we are functioning in a capitalistic republic, and I think capitalism is the first thing. The mighty dollar is what everybody is looking for, especially our politicians. So if we can organize, I love this idea of collectivizing the vote, collectivizing our power. If we can organize our voice and our buying power, our purchasing power, knowing that we do have limited choices. You know, one girl was telling me, she said, I go to the store, and we were talking about Driscoll's, which is, you know, a pretty prominent company for berries, raspberries, blackberries, strawberries, and they're here in California. They own about a third of the market, get about $2 billion annually selling their berries all over the world. She said, every time I go into the store, Driscoll's is the first thing I see, and it's always on sale. Why is that? And I don't have a choice to buy anything else. And so then that's real, right? Like, it's designed to keep Driscoll's in power. And we know Driscoll's was a company that actually took indigenous land from the original people here in California. So what do? So we redesign the system. We have a small piece of land. Maybe we could grow some berries and contribute those berries to the community, open revenues of distribution. But ultimately, I agree. We have to create alternatives. We have to collectivize our power, our voice, our vote. But vote. Don't think that just because I'm one person and I don't like Joe Biden, I don't like Kamala Harris, I definitely don't like Donald Trump, I'm not going to vote for any of them. I mean, that's kind of playing into the fold. So let's play the game, but let's create those alternatives. And I think that's what Brother Tyson was saying. Let's vote, let's do it, but we have to ultimately create alternatives. We have to create autonomous institutions that represent our communities.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. I'm going to go with Centoya.
Hi, Brother Matthew. I want to say the strawberries from the Castlemont farm are so delicious. I was able to pick
Wonderful.
one from the farm sometime last summer. So they are so good. So thank you for just bringing that to East Oakland and growing those strawberries, and for all the young people who are a part of that. In terms of voting, vote. Like, that's all I can say. Vote, vote, vote. Vote local, know your local elections. Vote nationally, vote in this election, the national election. It makes a difference. It makes a difference for those of us on the ground, for communities. And it's not the only, it's not like electoral politics is not it definitely is not the end point, right? We are working for transformation, for liberation, right? For actual change. And so it's not, but I remember crying at the last national election because I work with those same young people, right, in East Oakland, and I knew I know the impact of good policy change on the ground, and how that really does impact real people's lives and their ability to access healthcare, for example, for their ability to access just basic things that they need for their lives. And policy makes a difference in people's lives. And so I just want to I can't emphasize that enough, and how important it is to vote in this, for everybody who is eligible to vote in this election, because there are many people who can't, right? In our undocumented sisters and brothers, can't vote. There are other people, formerly incarcerated folks, who can't vote, right? Like, there are many people who can't vote and who are also going to be impacted by policy change. And so if you can, please do, and vote early, vote as soon as you can. I think that's what I want to say there. It's not the end. It's not the only. It's not everything. It's not going to, voting in and of itself is not going to get us everything we need. Like, vote and then keep working towards change and collective change, right? Like, connect up with some folks who are doing some community organizing, and keep working for transformation, change in the world that we need to see. But know that policy makes a huge difference for vulnerable communities, and that's what I have to say there.
Thank you. Sis, you got something you want to add?
Well, I just think that, like, I remember when my daughter was in middle school, and I can't remember what happened, but one of the things that we decided that they needed to do was watch the film Selma and write a report on it, as a way of understanding the importance of voting and what people have done historically to make that accessible. And when I think about, just all of what has happened this year, and sort of John Lewis dying, and that film, and just sort of the historical notions of it, and then when I look at where we are now in terms of the protests in the streets, and how it feels like we're on the verge of a civil war, I think we need to look at the whole current administration of this 45th president as the same sort of things that happened in the South in the 60s, where you had these really racist sheriffs, right? Like, you had a Bull Connor and a Joel Prickett, or whatever his name was, right? I think it's the same exact mentality. It's the same sort of energy. I know, we're 60 plus years on this side of it, but it really, 70 years on the side of it, but it really is that same sort of like seated hatred, right? And I think if we're not thinking about anything else, and if we're not thinking about the people, just think about voting hate and racism out, right? If we can't get around that, which white dude is the worst white dude, let's just go for the white dude that we know is not spewing hate.
Thank you, sis. Thank you, sis. I was thinking about the young people, and I was thinking about what you said, Centoya, about there's so many more ways than just voting. And, from what I've been seeing, walking the streets, seeing on social media and on the news, I see a lot of people think that the pandemic is going to end December 31st, 2020, right? Um, and we know that we got to pass the torch to our young people to organize and mobilize. I was curious to ask everyone, how do we get our young people excited and energized about organizing and mobilizing? And I'm going to start with Brother Tyson.
I think there's a lot, and I think they already got that. You know what I'm saying? There's so much that our young people, they've been living through the same thing that we've been living through, and they got their thoughts, they have their reactions to it, and they want to do something about it. And so some of it is simply stepping back and allowing them to take lead on those things. And then in our support role, making sure that there are connections to some of the stuff that we've been talking about, like the historical legacy of certain movements in our community. So they're well aware of that. And it's not simply them thinking they got to reinvent what has already existed. Now, there are things that are different because the conditions always change. 2020 is different than 2019. We know that. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation the way that we are. So conditions are constantly changing. So there are principles, there are strategies, there are tactics that are, you could say, universal to a certain degree. And then, but those things have to be applied based on the conditions that we're experiencing. And so they have a lot of that knowledge and that understanding because they the ones who were completely fluent in these various social media platforms and other ways of organizing young people or being able to speak the language of the people in this day and time. Like they got that. So we got to support them and we got to empower them in that and then do our job, whatever that is, in terms of supporting with connecting it to other generations, you know, being a mentor, helping to facilitate something like that. But there's so much that they already have. So it's allowing them to do that and then supporting them from whatever vantage point that we have or whatever we feel our role is in supporting that movement going forward.
Thank you. You got Bar. Oh, did you hear me, Centoya? Oh, I was gonna ask, how do we keep our young people energized about organizing, moving forward?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear you. But I think one of the things, just as Brother Tyson was saying, is that, young people have been, are already agitated and have a lot to bring and have all, young people have been part of kind of the forefront of every social movement, probably across the globe, right? And so I think partnering with young people as adults, right, being able to come together with them around what are their ideas, what are their, what are places where they're outraged, and how do we kind of keep moving forward? Know that they're already out there, on the streets, they're already kind of fired up and ready to go. But I think that they do need, and that's why I say that youth adult partnership, like it is moving out of the way, but there's a collaboration. And I think you saw that in Ferguson, right? Like kind of some of that tension between the youth activists and the elders activists and organizing, like how do we actually just, there's not one right way and figure out together. There is some stepping back that needs to happen, but also coming together to really share that wisdom of the elders who have been doing community organizing and movement building and coalition building, for years and years and years. But we also need that heat, that fire, that energy of young people. So I think it's just that collaboration. And then some of the letting people know that there's a different way. Like, again, kind of we talked about kind of that lull of, and I'm going to come back to capitalism, like that lull of distraction, right? Like, if you think about the music industry and the way what is promoted, it's like, I think some of that restlessness or that fire that we need from adolescents and young people kind of gets, I don't know, lulled out by like, oh, I just need the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And that's going to like somehow make me feel better. And it's like, really, how do we, or be, somehow that's going to satisfy something, right? And so it's like, and that's what I have a middle school 11-year-old son, right? And he's like, if I could just get the next Jordans, or if I could get the next, this thing for my room, it's like, okay, like that's, you can put that on your Christmas list. And like that, just wanting something, like wanting to like buy or shop or whatever, like that's not going to actually satisfy you, ultimately, and in a deep way. And so keeping people connected to, as Matthew said, to the land, but to each other. And that, I love what you said about collective health, and that we're accountable for each other's collective health and well-being, that it matters. And like, Ubuntu, like my well-being is connected and tied up to yours. So there is some, just that education, that tapping into their own interests, but know that they are, young people are bright and brilliant, and are partners inside of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Centaur. I want to add, I love what you said about, collaboration between the young and the elderly, and how we need to bridge that gap, because a lot of the times the youngsters look at the OGs like, you too old, you don't know nothing, but the OGs got all the wisdom, and, we both can benefit from each other. I was having a discussion with my cousin yesterday. He came over and he was telling me, he's like, cuz, like, you got that connection between the older and with the younger. So you got the ability to bridge that gap. And so, aside from me, I know it's more people. You guys all do it as well, help bridge that gap. So that's something that I would like to encourage us to continue to do, even with the youngsters, to embrace the elderly, and for the elderly to embrace the youngsters, and just come to an understanding. I think Matthew was saying that sometimes it's about understanding one another, or I'm not sure if it was Tyson, but one of you guys said something about understanding one another, and that's what we lack in society. We're so quick to judge and not just take a listen to, and understand each other's cultures and the way we do things. So I appreciate that, Centoya. I'm going to move on to Brother Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Zimbabwe. I love that idea of like, we have to recognize the power of this generation, right? And I think the stereotypes always like, oh, back in my day, right, we had to do this. It was so much harder. This generation's soft and all this stuff. But I mean, ultimately, they have the tools that I don't know how to use. Like they kind of duped Trump on that TikTok thing, right? And I mean, that's power right there. Like he tried to shut down TikTok now because of that. So I mean, they're doing it, right? And they're doing it in ways in which my generation, we would never have thought of doing it like that, like, right? And so that gives me a lot of hope. I love working with young people, because my daughter was born this year in 2020, and so I tell them, I say, just like I'm out here working with y'all, trying to guide y'all, teach y'all, I need you to be that for my daughter, right? And I know they hold that, like they really hold that to serious, and so I think that that's a big part of it, is like remembering our interconnectedness. That like when you succeed, I succeed too. And so I really got to put that energy out there to make sure you succeed. And I got to make sure that my peers are doing what they need to do to be successful. And so that's a big part of the teaching that we really instill upon them, is like, hey, we're in this together. Like it's in Lakesh, you are me, I am you. What I do to you, I do to myself. And I was just thinking about something else, and then In Lakesh got in my head, and now I kind of got off my train of thought. But ultimately, our young folks are powerful, and they have voice, and they have that power. And really what it comes down to, I don't think there's a lot of opportunity in our institutions for them to utilize their voice and their power. My wife teaches at Skyline High School, and she teaches this class, and in her class, she asks her students, like, what's up? Because they're not participating, they're not engaged. Like, what's going on? And they told her, they're like, well, this is what we do in all of our other classes. We just get talked to all day. Our teachers just talk at us, and we're not expected to contribute. And so that's where it comes, us as the elders, we have to create that space for them intentionally. We have to amplify their voice. We have to give them the tools where they can use their voice and practice using their voice. Last week, one of the panelists was talking about practicing democracy at home. Like, practice these things, right? Like, if we don't practice it in the safety of our home and safe community, how are we going to use it when we need to against the oppressor, right? And so it's the same thing with our voice. Like, we have to give young folks the space to use their voice, to recognize their power. We have to give them the space to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes, and ultimately to recognize that power.
Thank you, Brother Matthew. Words of wisdom. And sis, before I move on to you, I just want to say you have the ability to navigate and work with every generation, from YU to building bridges, doing the juice bar and connecting with young people, and with the food commonwealth. Like, what's the method to your goodness? I'm not gonna say madness, it's the method to your goodness.
I just believe that love is our central and guiding force, period. However we can use that, however we can use our own tools and treasures to amplify that message. Mine just happens to show up on a plate. So folks, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for sharing your time and your talents and your treasures. Please enjoy your dinners. Make sure you leave us some messages and some notes to let us know how amazing that food tastes. All right, Z, take it away.
Okay, I want to thank all of the amazing guests who showed up today. We have to collaborate. Like Tyson said, it's our responsibility. Thank you for joining us at Building Bridges, Food and Conversations. There's healing at the table, y'all. We will see you soon. Thank you to the viewers, and we'll keep it going. Have a great evening. Peace.
Thank you, everyone.
Peace, y'all.
Y'all stay safe out there. It's good meeting everybody. Y'all be smooth.